Thank you, Crystal. Dacher, welcome to Aspen.
It's good to be here.
We've already discussed that you haven't been overawed yet by the altitude because you came from Santa Fe.
We did, and Telluride. And Telluride people were saying, you give those Aspen people some trouble, so.
Good. Okay, we'll be waiting for some trouble.
Yeah.
Let's start with first, I'm not sure how many of you have read the book. I encourage all of you to do so. Tell us, what is awe?
Yeah. It's something of a paradox because awe is a mental state, and it's really an essential part of many different parts of human history, from religion to music to visual art to big ideas. And like William James, a lot of people have felt that awe is beyond words. I don't think that's true. We have to start with definitions to do science and scholarship. And so we, in kind of this more recent scientific tradition, define awe as an emotion that you feel when you encounter things that are vast, that are beyond your typical frame of reference, and that are mysterious, right? That your current knowledge structures can't immediately make sense of, and you feel dumbfounded or beyond understanding of things. There are counterexamples to that. There are tiny things that make us feel awe. You look under a microscope, you feel awe. There's a room in the Art Institute at Chicago which reproduces rooms from different periods of history that are really tiny. They're awesome, but they're tiny. But on balance, awe is an emotion we feel around the vast mysteries of life.
And tell us what physiologically happens in your body when you experience awe. We have all had goosebump moments, and those are the things that we frequently will, when you encounter awe, you will then say to your friend, if you explain that moment of awe, you'll say, I'm getting goosebumps just remembering this. So tell us what happens in the body.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, the science that I work in had this fight or flight bias, really I think coming from Freud and others, and we learned a lot about the stress-related physiology that probably many of you have heard about, like the amygdala in the brain and cortisol, the stress hormone, sympathetic autonomic nervous system activation, which increases blood pressure. And there was this sense that you couldn't find the physiology of positive states, that it didn't exist. But I really took inspiration from Walt Whitman, who said, if the soul is not in the body, where is the soul, right? And I think he's right, that our experience of the soul, the sublime, is in the body, and we know it, right? And so it turns out, ironically, with a lot of really sophisticated science, that we've learned a lot about the neurophysiology of awe. It shuts down what's called the default mode network, which is where the ego has a lot of activities going on, so that's the ego dissolution of awe. Awe activates a particular kind of tear. How many of you have teared up in awesome moments at music? That's a very specific kind of tear that theologians call tears of grace, which is organized by certain regions of your brain and your body. Awe activates what I study in my lab, the vagus nerve. Do you guys know the vagus nerve? It's probably the best indicator of your physical health is what the vagus nerve is doing. And then goosebumps, there are two kinds of goosebumps, actually. There's the shudder, which is about horror, and then there's the tingly sensation that goes up your arms and the back of your neck and your scalp. Young people, some of you probably have 20-year-olds, they all have ASMR libraries of videos that give them the chills. You're all looking at me like, what is that, right? You know, like sort of listening to people do orthodontic procedures or eat food, crinkle paper. It's ridiculous, but it gives young people the chills, and that's a specific kind of physiological response. There are little muscles around your hair follicles that contract that are part of the awe response. Very importantly, Jane Goodall observed the goosebumps in the chimpanzees she observed in the Gombe Park and said, this is really the parallel in chimpanzee life to our feelings of awe and spirituality. And chimps show it around amazing acts of nature, like the mountains around here, big storms. We were talking about a meteor shower. Chimps have that same response, which is about merging with others to make sense of mystery.
Do you remember your first experience of awe?
is my mom around here? Or why are you asking this question? Like, that's a contested topic in my family. So, yeah, I remember, and it's such a great question you all should be asking yourself when you come out of here, which is, what are those really early experiences of awe that you can remember? And what do they tell you about your family and your life history? And a couple really jump out at me, and one is my dad was a visual artist in LA, and he took me to the LA County Museum, and I was blown away by the La Brea tar pits, where there's a saber-toothed tiger and a woolly mammoth stuck in the tar, right? And I was 4 or so, and for me, it was evolution. It was just like, look what life forms looked like 20,000 years ago, and that's evolution, and I've loved evolution ever since. And I got second place in the cake baking contest with my T-Rex dinosaur cake, which is an important outgrowth of that inspiration. And then I remember camping. You know, we were a big camping family, you know, and I remember one in particular just sleeping with my brother near the Pacific Ocean and just like full on awe.
Do you think as we mature, our experience of awe or our responsiveness to awe changes?
Yeah, you know, everything changes with development, and I think we're starting to learn how childhood really is about awe, and being around children is about awe. It's this dynamic energy that catapults children to, you know, knowledge about the physical world, the social world, language, and et cetera. So it's very alive then. And then what we've learned is, you know, starting from about age 16 or 17, awe just diminishes dramatically until you're 45 and you have a midlife crisis, or 50. That's kind of true, I hate to say it. And then I think the one interesting frontier is we know emotional life gets very rich and interesting later in life, you know, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, as time changes, as generations start to layer in our ideas about life. And I think that'll be a fascinating frontier to see what is poignant awe like and how it changes with time.
You spoke just a minute ago about awe living in the body, soul living in the body, rather. And as we get older, our experience of that changes. As we approach the end of life, talk about the power of death and awe, and how awe-inspiring it can be. And does that cut both ways about fear? I'm really interested in the fear piece too, but talk for a minute about that.
Yeah, you know, one of the main reasons I was doing a lot of lab science on awe at Berkeley and different parts of the world. Fascinating emotion to study, what it does for us, how it helps us fold into social groups and become altruistic, the physiology of it. And then life intruded, and my younger brother, whom I'd shared almost every awe experience from, you know, camping to late 60s to Little League to, you know, growing up as teenagers in the Sierras, he passed away from colon cancer. And on the night of his passing, I was next to him holding his shoulder, you know, just thinking about all the footballs he threw with the shoulder and all of our life together. And like a lot of people who approach the end of life with someone they love, I was blown away by the mystery of it all. You know, that what is life? Why is it so short for some people? How can I move forward in losing this companion in awe? And that really animated the writing of the book, to go in search of how we find meaning in the context of such trauma, in some sense. And we're learning a lot about that. We're learning, and I write about this in the book, about the person approaching life. There's a whole new science of near-death experiences. And there's a really interesting regularity that goes through a person's psyche as they approach death, of oceanic feelings and feeling familiar people around you and sense of deep love. there's a very new literature that really would make contact with, the indigenous traditions and rituals around dying of how we find meaning in the aftermath of losing people we care about, how we turn to rituals and stories and the like. So that's striking. And then, the fear dimension to awe that you bring up is profoundly important. Awe has really changed in its meaning over time. You can tell a cultural history of awe. Early 8th, 9th century, 10th century, it has a lot of fear in it, a lot of horror, because those were horrifying times in many parts of human history, very violent, plagued by disease and the like, and torture and so forth. Awe was about dread and terror. Awe today, through the course of history, we've done studies in 30 different cultures. Awe feels uplifting. It's full of energy and enthusiasm. But there is this layer of fear and terror that you tend to find in more religiously dogmatic cultures, where you tend to find in cultures with greater economic inequality, awe will start to feel colored by this sense of fear and anxiety and so forth. So, and it really changes the subjective qualities of the experience.
Can you outline the 8 wonders of everyday life for us?
Yeah, thank you. Really important. We were doing studies of awe, and, I can get a goose cam and measure your goosebumps if you're interested. I'll show you later on. I can, in our lab, we can measure a universal vocalization of awe. I'm going to count to 3, and I want everybody in this room to give me their best sound of awe. 1, 2, 3. That was a little bit too ecstatic over there, but that's okay. That's a human universal. It actually has the sound structures of a lot of chanting and the like, which is interesting to think about. We can measure awe in the brain. We can measure awe with self-reports. I can ask you how awe-struck you are, how wonder-filled you are. And, this is the first time in my scientific career where I really felt that these narrow measures of psychology don't do justice to this experience, right? And so at the time, I decided to read William James's revolutionary book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, from 1912. And to make sense of the feeling of religion, William James gathered stories, right? Stories from Walt Whitman and Tolstoy and people he knew and Puritan preachers and the like. And so what we decided to do, and it was really my students who were really the engine of this, is we gathered stories of awe from 26 countries around the world, from India and Mexico and Brazil and China and Japan and Russia and all over the place. And it took us, with the help of speakers of 20 languages, 2 years to translate them. And they're incredible stories. I wish I could share some with you. And there are a lot in the book. They really anchor the book. And then we classified those stories into what I called the 8 wonders of life, and where we find awe. Okay, see how this lines up with you guys. Nature, who's had that one? Very good. Spiritual experience, excellent. Visual art, got an enthusiast over there. Music, definitely. Big ideas. We're at the Institute of Ideas, so that's more uncommon, and I love the category because, when I talk about awe to groups who are like, big ideas, and then, I describe it like epiphanies, et cetera. Somebody will raise their hand like, oh man, dark matter. We're all dark matter. What is it? You're like, we're all dark matter, but if I burn your skin, your dark matter will tell you you're pretty or whatever. But big ideas, collective movement, sporting events, dance, and so forth. Life and death, which is interesting, the life cycle, very prominent in indigenous cultures like Dr. Uriah Salidwin studies. And then fascinating, the most common source of awe worldwide was what we call moral beauty, which is, man, these stories started flowing in of somebody sacrificing for another person, which we do routinely. The courage people show I work with doctors during the pandemic. On a regular basis, they said, right before getting a terminal diagnosis, a patient will look at them and say, thank you for all you've given to me, showing so much courage. Overcoming, right? Overcoming physical conditions, poverty, right? People who rise inspire us. And justice, a sense of speaking truth to power. So moral beauty, we often forget about it. We cite the mountains as sources of awe or the music festival, but it's the people around us who really are our big source of awe.
Let me ask you if the reverse is true then. So witnessing moral beauty, a source of awe,
Yeah.
the most commonly expressed, as you said, throughout the world.
Yeah.
The reverse would be witnessing acts of cruelty,
Yeah.
violence. Does that have a...
Yeah.
Talk about that, please.
No, it's actually one of the deepest questions surrounding this, which is that, and philosophers are starting to take this on, which is that our understanding of the good or what's moral has these twin emotions or senses of humanity accompanying them. One that I write about is awe and moral beauty and courage, sacrifice, and the like. And the others philosophers call moral ugliness, which is arrogance and genocide and greed and we have emotions that inform us about that, like contempt, right? Like, that person isn't worthy. And so those twin states, complementary states, start to give texture to, this is why I'm inspired by this movement. This is why this political movement offends me, right? And it sharpens our moral sensibilities to have the counterpart as well. Really important.
You talked about movement, dance or sports events, things of that nature.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the moment or the intersection where those are. We just spent 6 months in New Zealand working. My husband was working at a hospital there, and the haka, the war dance.
Yeah.
Awe-inspiring.
Totally. Yeah.
But it's preparation for. Now it's not, but it's preparation for warfare.
Yeah.
And even the collective awe of the waves that you discuss at sports stadiums. And when you participate in those, I actually wanted to try it here to see if we could get a wave going here, but I think you need the full circle. But that's a tribal thing.
Yeah.
And tribal by definition is us versus them.
Yeah.
So how does that square with the dissolution of self and the power of awe bringing us together?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably a different interpretation that would offer. I don't know about the haka war dance enough to really make the case, but there are rich archaeological traditions about this realm of awe, which is collective effervescence. Emile Durkheim, a great French sociologist, said, and now the neuroscience is showing we are wired to move with each other, beginning at about 9 months of age, to rhythms and sounds and other people's movements. That movement syncs up our physiology all the way to patterns of brain activation. Then we enter into, this is really hard to pull off. If you're a teacher, you know how hard this is to get everybody to focus on the same thing. That's very hard to do. Collective movement does it really quickly. And then we have a sense of the meaning of that. And there are fascinating studies of this realm of awe in dance. There's a whole new science of dance. If we all dance together, we'd like each other more. We give more to the Aspen Institute, so et cetera. And then these cultural forms, like the haka war dance, and there's a countervailing hypothesis, and it actually comes, my partner, Dr. Yuri Salidwin, who knows a lot about indigenous cultures. The oldest sort of celebratory, ritualistic dance forms or sports forms are the Mayan ball courts. 3,000 archaeological sites, predates the Olympics, which has a similar story to it. And what those games did is they brought communities together in synchronization from different tribes to create collaboration, right? As did the Olympics. And so it's an interesting question. Do these ritualized forms of dance and games and competition, perhaps the antidote is, the opposite is true, which is they actually make those regions more collaborative. And so if the Red Sox and the Yankees didn't sort of have these ritualistic combats in the fall, New York and Boston would be at war with each other at all times. So seems true to me.
I want you to talk about the study that you did with Daniel Stancato, and you tested the theory that exposing people to awe affects the polarization. They have less polarized views after.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Thank you for asking about that. I haven't heard questions on that one. Yeah, there's this notion in the literature, or there's a notion, and there are a lot of myths about awe, and this is why we do science, in some sense, or scholarship. One myth is it's very rare. In fact, we find awe is experienced by people worldwide 2.34 times a week. So we did the careful study. But that's why it's all around us. Awe doesn't need a lot of resources to go find, right? You can just think about something for a moment and feel awe. And then this study with Stancato, who I lost, he decided to go to Meta instead of an academic career, which I forever am disappointed. Anyway, that's what happens these days. But there is this notion that awe makes us stupefied and less sophisticated in our thinking. That we have an awe experience and we don't think about things carefully, we're susceptible to bad ideas and the like. And I think in some ways that's true. I suspect it's involved in conspiracy theories. It's like, wow, QAnon got it all right, or whatever. but what the literature shows is these experiences of awe make us sharper in thinking about evidence. They make us more critical. They make us see the systems around us, systems of people and ecosystems and the like. And then Daniel showed really nicely, if I have a brief experience of awe, I don't have a simplistic view of the political world. I don't polarize progressives and MAGA people into opposite camps. I see that there are underlying similarities, which there almost always are, to people's political views, social views. So they don't view the world so politically extreme. And as you all know, we've seen this rise in polarization. People routinely overestimate the polarization of American citizens, and that gets us into trouble in terms of discourse, and awe counters that.
Do you think with the rise of just this online world and technology, and I don't have my phone on me, thank God, but is it more difficult now to experience awe, especially for kids? Do you think?
It's such a, when I read the work of, really the rich characterizations of the prominence of awe in indigenous cultures by people like Dr. Yuri Solidwin, you get a sense that transcendent feeling is more commonplace, right? In design and ceremony and thinking and interpreting dreams and all the rich manifestations of that. When we think about our kids today, what we do know, in some sense, we know, and those of you who are raising teens right now, awe is in shorter supply. And the data are clear. Epidemic levels of anxiety and depression in our young people today. And those are antithetical to experiences of awe, so we know awe is lower. Many of you, probably in your own reflections, would think, God, my childhood was so different than young people today, the pressures they face. And that's why in the book, I was blown away by an essay by Rachel Carson, the great environmentalist, Teach Your Child to Wonder. And she just lays out, here's how to teach your child to wonder. We've built a awe curricula for schools that will launch in October at the Greater Good Science Center, and it's urgently needed for our young people. As urgently needed, way more important than learning advanced math, way more important than learning a third language or learning how to fence or whatever it is. It's like, it's fundamental to the human imagination, and we've worked against it.
Are there experiences of awe that we can, I don't know, trick ourselves into having and or stimulate in other people and or prolong? They seem fleeting and you know, we have that experience of telling about something and, oh, I got goosebumps again. But typically they're pretty fleeting.
Yeah. How
can we game it?
She's a journalist, isn't she? Yeah, that's such a good question. You know, I'm worried about the gamification of awe. I've seen, first of all, it's interesting in our study of all 2,600 people around the world, no one mentioned a form of technology as a source of awe. Period. No phones, no Facebooks, no Google searches. Google search is the antithesis of wandering. So, you know, sorry if you work at Google, but that's, so can we game it? We've actually been really good at gaming it for thousands of years. We should be listening to music, we should be dancing, we should be meditating, thinking about spirituality, getting out in nature. And part of the intention of the book is in this post-pandemic moment to return people to a practice of awe, which we've now published a few peer review articles on, of how do I cultivate this emotion? How do I, in your case, your very astute question, sustain it? One of ours is the awe walk. We did a study with people who are 75 years old or older, once a week. Go look for one mystery and wonder in your walk. It helped 75 years old individuals and older with depression and anxiety. Their awe became more intense over time. So it's a very easy emotion to cultivate, to sustain, and to game. Can we trick ourselves into it?
Or others?
And that's a hard question. Or others? Oh yeah, I think it's happening all the time. I think, you know, I'm not going to offer any political commentary here. Yeah, you know, I mean, every human strength has hustlers out there who are like, I'm going to trick people and make some money off this, right? You know, and so, you know, there are awe spas and, you know, whatever it is. It's coming, yeah. So,
monetize awe.
Yeah, and you can monetize awe, virtual reality, you know, so. But the real thing, there's no substitute for it.
Okay, I want to push just a little bit here on this Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
With billions of people on the planet who are having a difficult time on a day-to-day basis, meeting their very basic needs, transcendence, self-actualization, awe is the highest on the pyramid. So how, just talk to that.
Yeah.
How do you square that?
Yeah, you know,
or push.
Maslow, not a form of scholarship, kind of, you know, wrote a book where transcendence, peak experiences, was at the top. And since the late 60s, when I think he wrote that, or 70s, we've really changed our thinking about needs. And there's this new, and it's accompanying our changing view of the human species, that we're a hypersocial species, and by implication, we have social needs. Our need to belong to other people is almost as profound as our need for protein. And if you don't satisfy the need for belonging, people, their lives are shortened. You see it in their physiology. There are specific physiological systems that serve that need. And we have a need for awe. It has physiological systems in it. If it's deprived, we suffer, and so on. And so I think and that would suggest the need to imagine and to be aesthetic and to lose the self. And so I think it's almost as fundamental a need as the classic biologically based needs. And then there's empirical data also suggesting Maslow was wrong, that it's once we satisfy all our basic needs, we can have time for awe and transcendence in music and art and the like. And that's that, on balance, people who are having a hard time financially feel more awe, right? And that's a paper by Jake Moskowitz, Paul Piff, nationally representative sample. So it tells us, importantly, awe is independent of satisfying these other.
All right, Maslow's out.
Yes.
Okay.
He's gone. But still very influential.
Okay, fair enough. We just came out of really traumatic event globally
Yeah.
of real isolation
Yeah.
and lack of community, the pandemic.
Yeah.
How are we dealing with that as a society, do you think?
Yeah, it was 30 worldwide, a nice paper published in Lancet, 30% rise in depression and anxiety worldwide. Worse for young people. And so this is, as Vivek Murthy, our Surgeon General, this is a social, physical crisis, health, mental, and physical crisis, and we will have 30 years of looking at the ripple effects of that, and we have to act boldly. And so I think, this is what editors tell you to say, so I wrote it. I don't think there's anything better for your mental and physical health than 5 minutes of awe a day. And the data support that thesis, and our young people need it. Our world needs it. So
You outline ways to do it
yes.
in the book. Do you want to give us a couple?
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to hear from our audience too about that, but there are simple, we just published a paper kind of looking at, there are these different mindsets, if you will, Carol Dweck's phrase of being grateful or kind to yourself. There's an awe mindset, just pause, don't name anything, think about something vast you're part of in that moment. I'm part of this conversation. Where does this come from? Isn't that interesting? We tested that with healthcare providers during the COVID pandemic. Reductions in depression and anxiety over 21 days, right? Just a minute of thinking awe, get out in nature, listen to music intentionally, tell a friend a story of awe. Moral beauty, think about, just think right now about a mentor in your life, or an inspiration for you who inspired you morally. And those come to mind, and just reflect on that. These are simple things to do.
I want to go back a little bit to collective awe, and I want you to tell us about your experience in Bhutan.
I don't quite know which one you're talking about.
Okay.
So.
I think you witnessed a dance.
Yeah. For those of you who are lucky enough to travel to the Himalayas, it's such deep awe for many different reasons. And I had a variety of experiences with my daughter, Natalie, 6-7 years ago, that are really worth all of us being open to. Bhutan is a very deeply Buddhist culture. It's just part of the fabric of classrooms and conversations. The big experience for Natalie and me was part dance, but part just the chanting. We got led into a monastery. We're the only European Americans there. It was at 15,000 feet. Not a lot of people had gone through. And to just be amidst an hour of Himalayan Buddhist chanting and seeing the community and the movement and hearing the sounds, these ancient sounds, we came out of it and we had this awe response. We just started crying and felt open. We live in the United States in one of the most individualistic moments in human history. People live very separate lives. And to see how sound and religious ideas and movement unite people like that opened my eyes to collective effervescence and my very critical, skeptical daughter, Natalie. So very important to have those experiences.
And another one, I think, Scheherazade, a concert of, it wasn't Philip Glass, but and it's not Rimsky-Korsakov. It's not the traditional, is it Rimsky-Korsakov? Scheherazade? Who is it? Yes? Okay. It was a derivation or a...
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. That was, you asked, like, how can we go find it with music around? I'm sure a lot of you find it in music. I don't know a lot about music, but I have a friend who plays symphony, who plays cello in the Philadelphia Symphony, who loves awe. And so I went out it really, and it's a lesson in how to find really intentionally awe in the music we appreciate all the time. I was in this period of searching after the loss of my brother, starting to write this book. I had to write a chapter on music, which is one of the deepest questions in emotion. How do sound waves moving through your brain make you cry and think you're part of a community amidst strangers? It's stunning that happens. So I go to Philadelphia, interview Yumi Kendall, who's incredible, gave me so much. She called the experience of awe through music, she analogized and said it's like a cashmere blanket of sound. And that's all I had to, I was like, that's my chapter right there, right? But playing that night, and it's so interesting just to follow the origin stories, if you will, of why you're drawn to things, was John Adams. John Adams is a Berkeley composer who was part of the minimalist movement that began, in many ways, at UC Berkeley with, I'm forgetting the Idaho composer, not Brian Eno, he's much later, he's a popularizer. Anyway, so it had been very important to me. Brian Eno was important to me as a person. Now I'm drawn in to listen to John Adams. And he has this piece of music on Scheherazade, which is how we tell stories to save lives, because it tricks corrupt people with awe. It makes them peaceful with a moment of awe. I heard this music. I couldn't make sense of it. Suddenly, my body is changing. I start to weep. I go outside. The rain is dropping. I'm getting soaked. I'm like, I'm in love with humanity. No, but I had this big epiphany. I had no sense how music produced it through this very interesting personal experience. And how many of you have had an experience of music like that? Isn't it amazing? You can go to a musical venue, you hear these sound waves, they affect your body, and you literally are like, I know what life's about. I can't tell you why, because it's a different language, as Suzanne Langer, the philosopher, argued. But there it is. What I especially love, and when I talk with smaller groups, is you have people tell their stories of musical awe. And one of them is Kid Cudi, and another is Garth Brooks, and Taylor Swift we just heard, and Telluride. They're all different kinds of music, but it has the same core to it of what music gives us, and that's what happened with Scheherazade.
We're going to try a little experiment here.
Uh-oh. Can I get my goose cam?
I don't know what that is, but sure.
I'll film your goosebumps.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Oh, yeah. Sam, we're going to try this if you'll indulge us. We're going to see what happens here for a minute.
to see Sona Jobarteh, Jobarteh. She's one of Africa's first, first female kora player, which is a musical instrument that runs through male lineages. She's one of the first females. Man, does she play a mean acoustic guitar like Jimi Hendrix? And she started a girls' academy in Gambia. She is transcendent. For me, there are two big questions with music and emotion, and it's still, and I'd read Susan Langer if you're really interested in it. Susan Langer says, the reason music moves us is it characterizes certain life patterns, be it justice or love or beauty or transcendence or outrage or protest, that you can hear it in the music. Let's say there are 15 basic life patterns to human existence. Music captures them, and there's new science about how it's done with acoustic features of sound. We know physiologically, and you may have felt it, your chest feels to be opening a little. Who felt that? Right, that's the vagus nerve, kind of slowing heart rate, opening your breathing and the like, the goosebumps we've talked about. And the untapped question is how it speaks to you, how it moves you very personally and almost morally, right? And so for me, I thank you for playing that, Sona Jobarteh. When I first heard kora, I was like, I can't tell you why, but it gives me this feeling of some form of spiritual peace. That's what I hope, in some sense, the science of awe can bring to people, is to start to think more intentionally and robustly about all these incredible forms of culture that are there to bring us awe. And then she's somebody that she should be bringing awe to many people. So thank you for playing her.
Very cool. Dacher, thank you. We're going to turn to the audience now. We have people here with microphones. I think in the back is someone first.
It was lovely for you to talk about awe. Some of us are skipping out to go to the Mozart's opera, so don't take it personally. A shout out tomorrow for awe is one of the best concerts at the tent at 5:30. Pianist, if you're here, and violinist, and I go every day, and this is going to be a highlight of the season. Nice. Anyway, my question to you is, and you've shouted out to John Luther. And it was funny because so many people didn't like Adam's concert last Sunday, but if you closed your eyes, it was transcendental, whereas before it was just modern music. So thank you for that shout out. My question to you is, do you or any of the people you work with or know, have they studied working in prisons where people have been addicted to, maybe power or fear or control, or maybe even murderers or homicide people or whatever, and have they worked in a short amount of way, which would also teach them meditation?
Yeah.
And any results?
Yeah, in the book, one of the interesting challenges in the book is to find more moral beauty. And for me, I find it working in prisons and doing a lot of prison work for various reasons. At San Quentin Prison in California, there were a lot of meditation programs. There's a little bit of research on it. And I was very happy, a person who works in prisons in Colorado is starting to teach some of the basic awe practices in prison. There's profound opportunity for growth, despite the conditions of our carceral system, which are brutal for the most part, and we need it, right? And I found it in full force in emergent journalism programs, spiritual programs, of interfaith conversations, restorative justice. So it's a good thing to be seeding in our prisons.
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you. Yeah, no. Thank you very much. It was inspiring. I spent my career as a sports commentator. I had the good fortune of covering 7 Olympics.
Wow.
And I hadn't thought about awe the way you described it in sport.
Yeah.
But I saw Greg Louganis win his 4th gold medal. I was a commentator for it. And so I was filled with awe, I think, every week of my life. But I wrote a book called Chasing Wonder, and it's not scholarly like yours, but if I may, I'd like to read 4 lines because I
Sure.
think it. Wander, wonder, it's what we all should do. Question, admire, let curiosity come through. And if you wonder, then it's wonder you'll find, awe and beauty of a staggering kind. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
You know, and can I just give a shout out to sports too? You know, awe, the sublime music, Mont Blanc, you know, religion. But sports brings so much awe to people. And it emerged in our worldwide study of awe. And I had the privilege of interviewing Steve Kerr for the book, who was blown away. He grew up around John Wooden UCLA basketball, which was a transcendent, statistically and aesthetically basketball moment. And it was, and I hear you, Greg Louganis was mind-blowing as a diver. So, and it's good to remember that. Thanks for the reading too.
The woman here, and then you're next.
Thank you so much. This is fascinating. You mentioned the vagus nerve and health and a monitor of health. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I said that really quickly, and I apologize. The vagus nerve is the largest bundle of nerves in the human nervous system. It's part of what we call the autonomic nervous system below the brainstem. So it starts up in your facial musculature and moves through your face into your throat, helps you vocalize, moves into your lungs and your heart, into your digestive organs, projects into your intestinal wall, gets information from the microbiome. It's the largest bundle of nerves in, it just coordinates all kinds of things. You can measure it by looking at how your heart rate and respiration work together, 2 of the basic biological rhythms of the body. We can measure that with some algorithms. And, you know, it's fascinating, and it's emerging in healthcare too. Probably, if you want one measure of how well a person is doing, you look at vagal tone. You look at, it's not heart rate, which doesn't tell you so much, except at the extremes. It's vagus nerve activation. It's related to the health of your body, the health of your heart, life expectancy, how you handle trauma, your resilience, et cetera. And there's a whole class of emotions that our lab has shown activate the vagus nerve. Compassion, awe, and feelings of beauty, right? And we're making the case that there's fight or flight physiology, one branch of your nervous system, many branches, and then there's prosocial physiology, which is the vagus nerve is part of that.
I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you.
I'm a professional magician.
Right on. Are you going to make me disappear?
No, sir, not at all. So I obviously have like 30 or 40 questions, but I won't take the patience of the crowd. I'll pick one. I think I'm really candidly pretty good at invoking moments of awe.
That's your job.
With my show.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in if you have looked at or know about ways of sort of putting a crowbar into that and extending it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you would maybe talk about that.
Yeah. If I understand the question. Yeah, I've gotten emails from so many interesting categories of people. Magicians is one. Astronauts. People are like, this guy studies awe, dear Professor Keltner, you know. Yeah, if you mean by extending the experience, thank you. And that is, you know, and you brought this up earlier, awe is this fleeting experience. Whoa, right? And then I think it's up to us to extend it and to build containers and philosophies around the experience. There are traditions like that, right? Like naturalists, birders, and backpackers, and people who fish become, you know, aficionados, and that's a way of extending the experience, so it becomes a basic state of consciousness. And I suspect you should be building practices that your viewers and fans can build out their experience of your magic. We're working with Carnegie Hall now and others about how do we extend the experience of music, right? Where you're like, God, that was mind-blowing. You forget it after 10 minutes. What can we do to make the philosophy of that experience extend?
All the way over here, Ari. Oh, thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I read.
You're the first to have said that, by the way. So,
I've read both your books. They're all.
oh,
Everybody buy them. They're the best.
thank you.
But in your Awe book, you talk about the 8 wonders, and I want to recall that they were actually sort of ranked by statistical things. So moral beauty was at the
I know.
top, and sort of spiritual ritual kind of stuff was like number 6.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for how faith-based franchise organizations who are all flagging,
Yeah.
first world countries particularly,
Yeah.
how can they inject more awe into what their service and their gatherings, their communities?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Thank you for reading the other books. I am one of those people. A lot of Americans are moving away from formal religion. 81% of Americans believe in a divine force or spirit and supernatural things. So it's this paradox of our culture of we've lost the forms, but we still feel it, right? And I think it's, and that has deep roots of Emerson and William James that I write about in the book. And I think that there are 2 layers of recommendations. The first is for the people in formal religions is, as William James said, get the feeling back in, right? Get movement in, get music in, get sociality in, get collective stuff in, and try to shy away from the more problematic sides of religion. And it's been so flattering to get emails and letters from rabbis and Mormon, I don't know what the term is, spiritual leaders, elders, how they're teaching awe now as a way for people to access it, independent of the religious dogma. So I think that's a start. And then I think just as importantly is for the spiritualists who go out and find awe climbing mountains, they need the structure of religion, right? They need the rituals and the stories and the histories that is so rich. And Dr. Uri Saliedwin talks about indigenous spirituality having those social containers. We don't have that, the spiritual types. So we need to learn from each other, and that's right. But I've been really gratified that, the chief rabbi of New York City gave a whole discussion on awe. And I think it's a democratized way to get a lot of people into that experience.
There's a woman on the, yeah.
Thank you. I wonder if you've come across or have studied in any way those of us who might be inspired and motivated by awe. I would be surprised if people in this room weren't in some way influenced to live in a place that is awe-inspiring on a daily basis. Some of us, I was a prodigy with a child with music, and I can't listen to music without crying, and I think if I looked back on it, a lot of my life choices came from chasing awe-inspiring experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we should always be thinking about the social context. And but there's a couple of encouraging findings about awe, and one is it's around us everywhere. And we just saw this. We do a methodology called daily diary where we ping people at the end of the day and we say, hey, you feel an experience of awe today? And that led to the 2.34 experiences of awe per week and this is important, right? In many different kinds of cultures. In smoggy Beijing, right, where the air is so bad, you feel like you couldn't have natural awe, and they do. And so I think it's this powerful capacity that we all should chase, not just the prodigies in music, but just everybody to find that profile that will fulfill that awe need, if you will. One of the other pieces of evidence that really struck me is we do this awe walk study. It's in Northern California. People are getting to be by redwoods and, cities and San Francisco and so forth. But, people have been doing that all over. We had a school teacher in the Bronx take her students right by a tree and a patch of grass to teach it. So it's a powerful emotion that should be cultivated by I think almost anybody.
We have time for one more, I'm afraid. The woman in the white.
Hi, thank you. I'm curious if you have in your research and in the academic environment you're in, seen a correlation between the benefits of psychedelics and mental health and the awe that psychedelics create? I'm just curious.
We had a bet.
Came in under the wire.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah. Yeah.
Just talking about that.
So, minute 30, few things to, a central notion right now in the literature on spirit medicine, psychedelics, is awe is the, what we would call the pathway that it leads to benefits, big experiences, changes in self, et cetera. And I think that will prove to be the case. So there is a similarity. Awe is important in those experiences, as it is in meditation and music and dance and nature and so forth. I keep citing Dr. Yuri Silidwin. She has a very important critique of the movement right now from an indigenous perspective. Cultural resources, physical resources are being extracted and colonized to make a lot of money, and with no benefits reciprocated. And there's no, spirit medicines occurred within much richer cultural, spiritual, ethical philosophies of living, right, and practices, and it's been extracted. You go to a room and put eye shades on and listen to some music, and that's your experience. There's much more to it than that. And then, I always approach it empirically, scientific, with one kind of science. The use of psilocybin in these experiments benefits people with trauma, benefits people facing life-ending disease, and I think that's good news, helps with addictions. The bad news is coming, which is, and one is microdosing. And there's a review out this year, microdosing, and it was a charitable review. It said, well, it makes people less depressed, but it also increases sleep problems and anxiety and rumination. I'll call it an even trade. And I think we're going to have real trouble, as we had when we liberalized the use of marijuana and heroin. And those are empirically demonstrated. And by the way, I grew up in the late 60s. I mean, I shouldn't be saying this, but I think it's real cause for concern. But there will be select, enduring upsides to this moment.
We wanted to conclude by having all of you, as you walk out, tell your partner or maybe even a stranger of an experience of awe that you remember. Challenge yourself a little bit, and maybe it's not nature-oriented, because we thought that would be a nice way for you to connect with each other as you walk out. And thank you so much, Dacher Keltner. There'll be books outside.